أتيتك يا خالقي باكيا ودمع الأسى كل حين يزيد فقد قلت في الآي لا تقنطوا وإن تعف عني فذا يوم عيد وإن تعف عني.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In our last lesson, we looked at the era of the Tābiʿīn and some of the collections of the Tābiʿīn, or the earliest collections we have, when we spoke about specifically the collection of Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, rahmatullahi alayh. And what we want to do in this lesson, inshallah, is look at the collection, or starting with the collections of Atbāʼ Tābiʿīn, those who, referring now to those who followed the Tābiʿīn but did not meet the Sahaba. And without a doubt, one of the greatest collections that we have during this era is the collection of Imām Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of the city of Medina, and he is Abu Abdullah Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi al-Madani. And of course, we know him simply, many of us know him simply as Imām Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, Malik ibn Anas rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi, he was born in the year 93 after the Hijrah. And in fact, if you remember this date, you could actually remember two people by this date. The first is Imam Malik ibn Anas, who was born during this time, and this is the same year that Anas ibn Malik, the Sahabi radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, died. So Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi was born in the year 93 after the Hijrah, and the Sahabi Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu died in that same year. There's no relation actually between them, but it's an easy date for us to remember. Inshallah, if we remember this date, then we can remember two significant people, one born, one who died during that day, or during that year rather. And his grandfather Malik ibn Abi Amir is actually from Kibar al-Tābiʿīn, referred to like from the great Tābiʿīn. Although he's from one of the greater Tābiʿīn, Imam Malik never actually narrated anything from him, and the reason for that is he died. His grandfather died in the year 94 after the Hijrah, so 1 year after Imam Malik was born. And his great-grandfather, Abi Amr al-Asbahi, is actually one of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. So you can see sort of the lineage of Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, and from this we can see how he grew up in the companionship of knowledge. And one of his greatest shuyukh, because Imam Malik was in the city of Medina, so he had access to many of the scholars during that time, and of course one of the great shuyukh that he learned much from and narrated from is Imam al-Zuhri rahmatullahi alayhi, Muhammad ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who again, as we spoke about in our last lesson, and he would actually narrate about 283 hadith from al-Zuhri. But one of the other people that Imam Malik narrated from was Nafi'. And Nafi' is the freed servant of Abdullah ibn Umar. He died in the year 117 after the Hijrah. And he is in fact one of the most who Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi narrated from. He narrated 287 hadith from him. And although it's fairly similar to az-Zuhri, in fact, a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a great deal of balaghat that Imam Malik narrated from az-Zuhri. And what this means is that Imam az-Zuhri would make his own statements, or he would give his own opinion about a matter, and Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi would narrate that from him. So not exactly a hadith to a Sahabi or to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but a statement from az-Zuhri. So this is why, but when it comes to Nafi', then Imam Malik narrated full hadith from Nafi' rahmatullahi alayhi. And one thing we should know about Nafi', just to show you the isnad of, or the chain of narrators, Malik who narrates from Nafi'. Nafi' rahmatullahi alayhi, when it comes to hadith, his status is great. He narrated from a number of Sahaba, including Abdullah ibn Umar, of course, he was the freed servant of Abdullah ibn Umar, but also from the children of Abdullah ibn Umar. And he narrated from other Sahaba such as Aisha radhiyallahu anha, and Abu Huraira, and Salama, and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abu Rafi', or Rafi' ibn Khadij and others. So Nafi' rahmatullahi alayhi grew up in the surrounded by Sahaba, narrating from many Sahaba, and Malik rahmatullahi alayhi had access to him where he learned a great deal from. And the reason why I say this is significant because the scholars place great emphasis on Nafi' and Malik from Nafi'. Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, who narrates from Nafi'. In fact, Imam al-Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, أصح الأسانيد مالك عن نافع عن ابن عمر, that the most authentic, or the most authentic of asanid, or of chains of narrators, is the isnad of Malik, who narrates from Nafi', who narrates from Abdullah ibn Umar. And Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, he would say, كنت إذا سمعت حديث نافع عن ابن عمر لا أبالي ألا أسمعه من غيري. He said that if I used to hear a hadith from Nafi', from Abdullah ibn Umar, I wouldn't care if I didn't hear this from anyone other than him. Meaning, it was sufficient for him to just, if he heard the hadith from Nafi', who narrates from Abdullah ibn Umar, he didn't care if anyone didn't narrate it. It was sufficient for him. It was enough for him. And Abu Ya'la al-Khalili, he says about Nafi', he says, صحيح الرواية لا يعرف له خطأ في جميع ما روى. That he is authentic, or his narrations are considered authentic, and it is not known that he made a mistake in any of what he narrated. So this is sort of the significance of Nafi', and then of course Malik, who narrates from Nafi'. And of course Imam Malik, he narrated from a number of other Tābiʿīn as well, such as Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, he died in the year 143 after the Hijrah, and Imam Malik narrated from him about 234 hadith. And then he also narrated from Hisham ibn Urwa ibn Zubair. Urwa ibn Zubair is of course the son of Zubair ibn al-Awwam and Asma radhiyallahu anha, and he is the nephew of Aisha radhiyallahu anha. So Urwa would narrate much from his aunt Aisha radhiyallahu anha, and Hisham, his son, would narrate from Urwa. So Imam Malik would narrate much from him. And Hisham ibn Urwa died in the year 145 after the Hijrah. And he narrated, Imam Malik narrated about 128 hadith from Hisham ibn Urwa. And he also narrated from Zayd ibn Aslam al-Adawi al-Umari, who died in the year 136 after the Hijrah, and he narrated from him 88 hadith from him. And of course, other Tābiʿīn as well included in this is Abu Zinad, who is Abdullah ibn Dhakwan, and he died in the year 134 after the Hijrah, and Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi narrated from him about 70 ahadith. And Abdullah ibn Dinar, also one of the famous Tābiʿīn, one of the well-known Tābiʿīn, he died in the year 136 after the Hijrah, and Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, he narrated from him about 48 ahadith. As for the virtues of Imam Malik, really there are many, but this is not really the place to discuss them. But I did want to speak about, inshallah, if we start speaking about the individual narrators, when we go into detail speaking about the asanid, perhaps when we start looking at the shuruh or explanations of some of the hadith, we'll give a more detailed biography of some of these people. But as for Imam Malik, the one thing I wanted to mention is the hadith sometimes we often hear, which it's attributed to Abu Hurairah anhu, that he narrates that the Messenger of Allah says, يُوشِكُ أَنْ يَضْرِبُ النَّاسَ أَكْبَادَ الْإِبْلِ يَطْلُبُونَ الْعِلْمَ فَلَا يَجِدُونَ أَحَدًا أَعْلَمَ مِنْ عَالِمِ الْمَدِينَةِ. That a time will come when people will strike the livers of their camels. What he means by this is that they'll strike the sides of their camels so that they haste seeking knowledge, and they will not find anyone more knowledgeable than the scholar of Medina. This narration was reported by Ahmad and was reported by Tirmidhi and Ibn Hibban and others. And a number of scholars have mentioned that this hadith refers to Imam Malik, because it's saying that there is none who is more knowledgeable, like they will not find anyone more knowledgeable than the scholar of Medina. Some notable scholars such as Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar ibn Rashid ibn Jurayj, and others, they said that this refers to Imam Malik. In fact, Sufyan ibn Uyayna actually has another opinion in this, and he says it refers to al-Umari, who is Abdullah ibn Abdul Aziz. ibn Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the descendants of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he was someone who was known to be a zahid, an ascetic in the city of Medina. So another opinion of Sufyan ibn Uyayna is that it refers to him, but the majority consider this to refer to Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi. The one thing we should know about this hadith is that it is not correct to affirm it to the Prophet or attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In fact, At-Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi, when he narrates this as the words of Abu Hurairah and not the words of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Imam Ahmad rahmatullahi alayhi, he also said concerning this that the most correct opinion concerning it is that it is a mawquf narration, meaning it is the words of a sahabi, being Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, and not the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's another narration that comes by the way of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, but this hadith is da'if, it's weak, so it can't be used to strengthen it, even though it's they attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the collection of a hadith, then as we mentioned, that it is considered to be one of the first collections of a hadith that was actually for the people. We mentioned that many before Imam Malik had their own personal collections, but one of the first collections that was meant to be distributed amongst the people or shared amongst the people is the collection of Imam Malik. And this collection is referred to as al-Muwaṭṭa, and al-Muwatta literally means something that has been made easy, from the Arabic watta'a. And the reason why it was called al-Muwatta is that there's two reasons given. The first is that it's reported that Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi himself stated, عرضت كتابي هذا على 70 فقيها من فقهاء المدينة فكلهم وطأني عليه فسميته الموطأ. So it's attributed that, or it's reported that Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi said that I presented this book of mine to 70 of the fuqaha of the city of Medina, and all of them agreed with me. Watta'ani means in this sense here, like meaning they agreed with me on it, so I called it al-Muwatta. And another reason that's given for it is that the Khalifa at the time, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he had come to the city of, he had actually come to the area of Al-Hijaz to first perform Hajj in Mecca, and then he went to the city of Al-Medina afterwards. And when he went to the city of Al-Medina, he sought permission to sit with Imam Malik, and he gained an audience with Imam Malik. And he sat with Imam Malik from Fajr until Dhuhr, asking Imam Malik questions, and Imam Malik would answer his questions. And following this session that he had, he said to Imam Malik that, I testify that there's none on the earth as knowledgeable as you are. And then he said to Imam Malik, he asked Imam Malik to write a book that would be given to the people. Actually, he wanted to force the people upon it. And Imam Malik never force the people upon it, or said he wouldn't force the people upon it, but he would write this book. But one of the things that Abu Ja'far al-Mansur said to him, he said, وَوَطِّئْهُ لِلنَّاسِ تَوْطِئَةً, and make it easy for the people, a great ease. This is another reason given for why the book is called Al-Muwatta, or the collection is called Al-Muwatta. And now whether this collection is actually one of the first collections or the first collection or not is actually debatable. And the reason for that is when Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi wrote Al-Muwatta, there were others during that same era who had also written. And amongst them you have, for example, Ibn Jurayj, who was Abdul Malik ibn Abdul Aziz. Ibn Jurayj, he died in the year 150 after the Hijrah. And he was one of the scholars of Mecca, and he wrote his collection in Mecca. And just for our own record, Yahya ibn Ma'in, he considered, Ali ibn al-Madini, he considered Ibn Jurayj to be one of the most أثبت الناس في نافع, meaning like the most, one of the strongest people concerning Nafi'. So remember we mentioned Imam Malik would narrate from Nafi'. Ali ibn al-Madini, he considered Ibn Jurayj to be one of the strongest people concerning Nafi', the narrators from Nafi'. And then you also had a collection from Ma'mar ibn Rashid al-Azadi, and he was one of the scholars of Yemen, and he a collector of a hadith. and he died in the year 153 after the Hijrah, and his collection for the most part is preserved in the Musannaf of Abd al-Razzaq. So Abd al-Razzaq is one of the students of Ma'mar ibn Rashid, and he collected most of the hadith, or most of the collections of Ma'mar are found in the Musannaf of Abd al-Razzaq. And then you also had al-Awza'i, who's Abd al-Rahman ibn Amr ibn Yahmad, and he wrote his composition in al-Sham. And al-Awza'i is also, of course, one of the fuqaha, one of the great fuqaha and collectors of hadith, or narrators of hadith, and he died in the year 157 after the Hijrah. And you also had Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Abdullah ibn Mubarak we've mentioned a few times before, but he had composed a collection in Khurasan, and he died in the year 181 after the Hijrah. Now Imam Malik dies in the year 179 after the Hijrah, so you can see that all of these scholars are sort of around the same era, and we don't know precisely who wrote first and who wrote second and followed, but the collection of Imam Malik is considered to be one of the first collections. Whether it's the first collection or not, Allah Ta'ala a'lam. Now the Muwatta was sort of an ongoing work. Imam Malik taught the Muwatta for over 40 years, and because he would constantly add and remove from the ahadith, and he would change in the wordings of the narrations, depending on when a person heard the Muwatta from Imam Malik, it might differ from someone else's collection. And this is the reason why, in fact, there isn't really just one Muwatta, but there's what they call Muwatta'at, which is the plural for Muwatta. And these would, so whoever would come and hear the Muwatta from Imam Malik, he would take it back to his city and maybe his people or others, and he would teach it. So and it would spread from there. And just to give you an example, like Imam Ahmad rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, كنت سمعت الموطأ من بضعة عشر رجلا من حفاظ أصحاب مالك فأعدته على الشافعي لأني وجدته أقوامهم. He said that I heard the Muwatta from 10 odd men from the Huffaz, like meaning those who memorized from the memorizers of the companions of Imam Malik. And he said, I recounted it upon Shafi'i because I found him to be the most authoritative amongst them. And in many of the shuruh, explanations of the Muwatta, like people who look at the Muwatta and give an explanation of the hadith, we're going to find some narrations that mention that Imam Malik put together the Muwatta from about 9,000 hadith, and he continued to reduce them until he got to the number that we have. And some narrations say 10,000 hadith, and he continued to reduce to the numbers we have. And Wallahu Ta'ala Alam, there's some question in this, whether this is actually true or not. And the reason for that is because if we say that the Muwatta was taught over a period of 40 years, if we look at those who took the Muwatta from, early on from Imam Malik, and we look at those who looked at, who reported the Muwatta afterwards, like during the last years of Imam Malik, we don't find such a large discrepancy in the number of hadith, meaning going from thousands reduced to much less than that. We don't find that at all. So perhaps something like this means that he had a collection of that many hadith, but when he put the Muwatta, he only included the hadith which he found to be the most sound with him. So Allah Ta'ala Alam, but in any case, we do know that there's a number of different Muwattas, and some scholars have mentioned over 100 different people who reported the Muwatta and taught the Muwatta from different places. And amongst some of the most famous ones is the Muwatta of Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, who died in the year 189 after the Hijrah. Now Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, he's actually one of the companions of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, one of the other fuqaha, and I'm going to mention something about him in the next lesson inshallah, about the collection attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa, because in terms of chronology, Imam Abu Hanifa actually comes before Imam Malik. But we'll speak about that next time inshallah. But Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, he's Hanafi, or Hanafi madhab, one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, and one of the great teachers of the Hanafi madhab. But Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, when he came to Al-Hijaz, he visited Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh, and he took the Muwatta from him. One of the things about his Muwatta, you'll find that it's a little bit less in narrations compared to some of the others, because he only included the marfu' narrations, meaning the narrations attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the mawquf narrations, meaning the statements of the Sahaba. But and then following that, he would have his own comments in there saying, and we agree with this, or but we find this to be stronger. So he would give his own opinion following the narrations. Another one of the narrators, one of the most famous narrators of the Muwatta, is al-Qa'nabi, who is Abdullah ibn Maslama ibn Qa'nab al-Qa'nabi rahmatullahi alayhi, who died in the year 221 after the Hijrah, and his collection is actually one of the larger collections of the Muwatta. And both Yahya ibn Ma'in and Imam al-Nasa'i rahmatullahi alayhima, they would consider that the Muwatta, as reported by al-Qa'nabi, is the most affirmed, أثبت الناس في Malik, that he was one of the most affirmed people, the most correct people when it came to narrating from Imam Malik, when it comes to narrating the Muwatta. And we also have Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, Yahya ibn Yahya ibn Kathir al-Laythi, who died in the year 234 after the Hijrah. And what makes his collection to be one of the most significant collections is that he heard the Muwatta during the last years of Imam Malik. And his collection is considered to be, I guess, one of the more final versions of the Muwatta, if you will. And his collection is also one of the most famous collections, as many of the people who did an explanation of the Muwatta of Imam Malik relied on the collection of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. And one of the next collection that we'll speak about, again one of the more famous collections, is the collection of Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri, who was Ahmed ibn Abi Bakr ibn al-Qasim ibn al-Harith al-Zuhri, who died in the year 242 after the Hijrah. Now his collection, he's one of the Imams actually, Imam Abu Dawood rahmatullahi alayhi, the author of Sunan Abi Dawood. But what makes the collection of Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri one of the most important collections is that this one is actually considered the last collection from Imam Malik. So he's one of the last people who heard the Muwatta from Imam Malik, or read the Muwatta back to Imam Malik, and it's also one of the larger collections as well, having nearly 100 narrations more than some of the other collections of the Muwatta that we have. As for the number of hadith in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, then it depends on who's reporting it, because as we mentioned, Imam Malik would add and sometimes he would remove narrations depending on when a person heard it. But the collection of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani has about 1,008 narrations, whereas the collection of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi has about 1,942 narrations between marfu' and mawquf narrations, so narrations that go to the Prophet ﷺ and narrations that stop at the Sahaba. And if we look at the collection of Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri, the Dar al-Risala, one of the publication companies who has it, they've numbered the hadith at 3,069, with the narrations at 3,069. And the one thing that they did is that they numbered everything in this collection. So they numbered the mawquf the marfu' narrations that go to the Prophet ﷺ, the mawquf narrations that stop at the Sahaba, the maqtu' narrations that are the statements of the Tābiʿīn, and even the statements of other scholars and the statements of Imam Malik. They numbered all of it, so we get from that 3,069 narrations in this collection. And this is something to take note of as well, because Imam Malik, the Muwatta of Imam Malik, isn't just a book of hadith, but it's a book of fiqh as well. Imam Malik would have his own opinions, or the opinions of the people of the city of Medina as well, and the opinions of the Tābiʿīn, and even the opinions of the Sahaba. So it's a book of fiqh as well as being a book or a collection of hadith. And as for the hadith in the Muwatta, then we should know that any hadith in the Muwatta of Imam Malik that has a connected isnad, meaning a full chain without any break in the chain, from Imam Malik all the way to the Prophet ﷺ, or even the Sahaba, so are authentic hadith. So every hadith in the Muwatta of Imam Malik that has a full isnad that goes to the Prophet ﷺ, it is a sahih hadith. And this is why Imam al-Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi said, مَا عَلَى ظَهْرِ الْأَرْضِ كِتَابٌ بَعْدَ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ أَصَحُّ مِنْ كِتَابِ Malik. That there is no book on the face of the earth after the book of Allah that is more authentic than the book of Imam Malik. And in fact, even before the Muwatta of Imam Malik, actually even before the collection or the compilation of Sahih al-Bukhari, people would refer to the Muwatta of Imam Malik as Sahih. They would call it a Sahih collection. And some even criticized Ibn Salah because he said أول من صنف فيه البخاري, that the first who categorized or codified a book of Sahih is al-Bukhari. And some criticized Ibn Salah for this, saying no, in fact Imam Malik was before Imam al-Bukhari, who put together a collection of Sahih narrations. And so some would say, well, no, Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Malik included other narrations aside from the Sahih, such as the statements of the Tābiʿīn and the Balaghat of al-Zuhri and others. But others would come back and say, well, Imam al-Bukhari did the same. When it came to his mu'allaqat, then he had the statements of Sahaba, he had the statements of others as well. So similar to Imam Malik. And then others would come back and they would say, but in Sahih al-Bukhari, it's easy to tell which is from the mu'allaqat and which one isn't, whereas the narration of Imam Malik isn't quite as fluid in this. In any case, this is a difference of opinion when it comes to that. But the Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, one of the things that he did, he was the first in doing this even before Imam al-Bukhari, is he categorized the hadith according to topics. So abwab, he would put for example, bab al-salat, and then he would have he would speak about everything that had to do with salat, and then he would have bab al-siyam, the book of fasting, or kitab al-siyam, and then he would have the kutub and abwab, so he would have chapters and then sub-chapter titles in his collection. And this was something that was new, it was not done before him, and Imam al-Bukhari would follow him in this. In any case, the Muwatta of Imam Malik is considered one of the most important collections of hadith, even before the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And it held a greater status amongst the people before. In fact, spreading in al-Hijaz and spreading, people from Yemen came and took it, and people from Iraq came and took it, and people from Persia came and took it. People in northern Africa came and took it and spread, and people from al-Andalus came and took it. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, who we mentioned as being one of the those who took the Muwatta from Imam Malik, took it all the way back to Al-Andalus, and he would become one of the fuqaha of Al-Andalus, one of the main fuqaha of Al-Andalus. So you can see how it really spread. And even though Sahih al-Bukhari now we consider to be one of the most important collections, if not the most important book after the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it didn't really gain that status until much later. So even after the death of Imam al-Bukhari, it didn't have that status, whereas the Muwatta of Imam Malik had that status during his time and then even afterwards as well. In any case, this is one of the things that we just wanted to mention, a little bit of a biography of about Imam Malik, and also a little bit about the Muwatta, one of the most important collections, one of the first collections in the collections of Hadith. And with this, inshallah, we'll stop, and in our next lesson we'll speak about some of the other early collections of Hadith. هذا والله أعلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.